Encounter is brought to you by the Birmingham County Council of Churches, where we connect compassion with needs as we inspire growth with dignity. You'll find us in special places throughout the community. For those who remain hungry, we provide meals. For those who are challenged, we build wheelchair ramps. We comfort those who are ill, minister to those who are confined, and we remain an advocate for change and understanding on behalf of every element of our community.
Hello and welcome to the Encounter program. I am Reverend Rachel Helgeson. I'm the pastor at Northminster Presbyterian Church, and it is an honor to be able to interview someone who is both a colleague and a friend, Pastor Emeritus from Northminster Presbyterian Church, Reverend Dr. Barry Downing. And I just would like to do a little intro for him so you know a little bit more about Barry. Barry earned his bachelor's degree in physics from Hartwick College, a divinity degree from Princeton Theological Seminary, and a PhD from the University of Edinburgh in Scotland, where he specialized in the relation between science and religion, which is a very specialized type of PhD. His dissertation is titled Eschatological Implications of the Understanding of Time and Space in the Thought of Isaac Newton, and has been made available by the university to be loaded online. So if you're interested in reading his dissertation, that's available to you. He published the Bible and Flying Saucers book in 1968, which has been reprinted several times in the USA, in Europe, and Biblical UFO Revelation in 2017. He became a consultant in religion to the Mutual UFO Network. How do you say the MUFON, or is there?
MUFON. MUFON,
yeah. Okay, I want to make sure I said that correctly. Thanks, Barry. And has published more than 24 articles in MUFON Journal, as well as addressing several MUFON conferences. He published several articles in the Encyclopedia of Extraterrestrial Encounters, edited by Ronald B. Story, and is listed in Who's Who in Theology and Science. He has also published an Ancient Astronaut magazine, UFO magazine, and Flying Saucer Review. And Reverend Dr. Downing has been interviewed frequently on radio and television and appeared in 10 of the History Channel Ancient Alien series beginning in 2009, which, if I recall, some of that may have been recorded locally. Am I recalling that correctly, Barry?
I was never recorded locally for the History Channel. It was either in Newark, New Jersey, or in New York City.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. So I'm really excited to be able to talk to Barry in this way. Barry and I are friends, so full disclosure, but and we've pastored the same church, not at the same time. But in doing that, we have some collective history together. But Barry specializes in this, and I thought this was an interesting time to be talking about how is the world connected, and what sort of things has Barry discovered in his journey of faith and his journey with science, and to reconcile both together in what he's learned. Quite often we don't talk about those two things together, and we certainly don't always talk about UFOs and faith and religion. So Barry has done all the things that are sort of sometimes become taboo topics at our table. And yet it's a thing that a lot of us are wondering and not quite sure how to ask. So Barry, welcome to the Encounter program. Thank you for being here today. I'd just like to open it up and let you say, where would you like to start to talk about what you have learned and what you'd like to share with our listening audience?
All right, let's start with the fact that I've been doing this quite a while, and I've lived in the Enwell area for more than 50 years, and the Bible and Flying Saucers was published more than 50 years ago. Let's see the first slide, okay?
Sure thing.
All right, here's
that up for you.
If we get it.
That's not it.
No, we're not getting it.
Here we go.
Yep, there we are. Here's an article from the Binghamton Press, which is in the Channel 12 viewing area, I'm sure. And many of you may have seen this article or others like it over the past years. This was from the year 2017 when my second book was published. And the headline, UFOs in the Bible, ? It's sort of like, are you kidding me? 50 years later, we still aren't sure whether we ought to talk about this, but I do, and so here we are. Next slide, please, Rachel.
Yep. Do you see the picture, Barry?
It should be Genesis 18.
Nope, that's not it. Hmm.
Don't see it yet. The picture that's supposed to be coming is going to show a tent scene with Rachel in Genesis 18 laughing or trying not to laugh, one or the other.
There it goes. There's Sarah. Yep. There we go. Do you see it? She's in the back of the tent and in front of and the messengers and.
All right. What I've got on my screen is the old picture still.
Okay. Well, I have it in front of me, so.
And so you think that's the one they're going to see? All right. There it is. Oh, no, that's you.
Now let me pull it back up again. I'll just.
Okay.
There we go.
Yep. Okay, what we have here is a scene of a tent, and the artist is Lynn Merrifield, who did many paintings for me dealing with UFOs in the Bible. We see the woman on the right smiling, and that's supposed to be Sarah, Abraham's wife. To the left of Sarah, we see three beings that look human-like, and then a fourth one with a cap on his head in the kind of Middle East garb. That represents Abraham. The other three beings are God and two companions, according to the story in Genesis 18. Notice there's a flying saucer in the background. In the Genesis 18 story, there is no flying saucer, but this is what you call artistic license, okay? Likewise, the clothing that the three men are wearing is more artistic license. They look somewhat like spacesuits, I guess. And the idea here is, could these be extraterrestrial beings that are meeting with Abraham? And my answer is we should think about this. The reason we should think about this is that we've got hundreds and hundreds of stories of UFOs appearing in our skies now. The Mutual UFO Network, MUFON, receives UFO reports. They receive more than 500 UFO reports every month. So this is not here and there we find a UFO report. They're all over the place. And then the question is, how long have they been around? And no one knows. For over 70 years, the Pentagon lied to us and said there were no real UFOs there. They were all mistaken identity of things like clouds or flocks of birds or a shooting star. Finally, in June of 2021, they said, oh yeah, it turns out there is something there, and they're very, very fast. So fast our jet planes can't catch them. So we finally got the Pentagon to admit something they should have admitted years ago, and that is we have UFOs. They are advanced technology of some kind. We don't know where they come from or why they're here now, nor how long they've been around over the earth. There's a UFO researcher named Jacques Vallée who believes UFOs have been around for centuries, and I also believe that. So what do we learn in this story? One thing is that Abraham believed God was very human looking. He could walk and talk with Abraham. Of these three men that came to visit Abraham, two eventually parted and went off to visit Sodom, whereas the third one stayed behind, and the third one was God. So this is a little shocking to most people who think of God as some kind of being way off in the sky somewhere that could never come to earth. But in fact, in this story, God looks very human. He talks to Abraham, and that means we have a talking God. This is really important, okay? Other religions may believe in some kind of superpower, but do they believe in a God who talks? We do. That is, we being those who believe in the Bible. The other thing to notice is that in the story, the God being said to Abraham, where's your wife Sarah? And Abraham said, she's in the tent. And the man said, when I return next year, she is going to have given birth to a son. And then the being said, why did Sarah laugh at that? And in the biblical translation, it says she laughed to herself, but not out loud. The implication is that this being could read Sarah's mind. This is interesting because in modern UFO cases, people report when they have contact with extraterrestrials, the extraterrestrials not only can read their mind, but can put ideas into their minds. So they have their own form of telecommunication. So we have several ideas introduced here about the idea of God that I think are generally ignored by many Christians these days. But the ideas are that God can look very human, God can talk, God can walk around on earth, God can read the minds of us humans. He doesn't have to hear us speak. He knows what we're thinking even. These are basic ideas to the biblical idea of God that are right in this Abraham story. Okay, let's move on now to the next slide, which is Exodus chapter 3.
Here we go.
What we're going to be seeing in Exodus chapter 3, oh dear. What we're going to be seeing in Exodus chapter 3 is the burning bush story of Moses. And what this is about is that Moses got in trouble in Egypt. He had to run for his life. He went out and kind of started working for his father-in-law, and that included herding sheep. One day he was herding his sheep when he saw a bush that appeared to be burning and yet not burning up. And he approached the bush to see what was going on. And the bush, by the way, is, I believe in Hebrew, properly called a thicket rather than a bush.
I think you're
The
right.
reason I say it's a thicket is because the biblical translation is that he saw a flame of fire coming out of the midst of the bush. If this were just like a tree, why would you say the fire came out of the midst of a tree? But if we're a thicket, a clump of bushes, then I can see saying the light came out of the thicket or the clump of bushes in the midst of it. In modern UFO cases, often if a UFO lands in an area of forest or in a clump of trees, some bushes, it often causes the leaves of the bushes to glow. And what I think we have going here is some type of UFO that landed on the ground and caused the bush to appear to be on fire, but not be on fire. And as Moses approached the bush, a voice came from the bush saying, "Moses, Moses, take off your shoes. You are on holy ground." Noticed in the picture, he has bare feet. That's good. Whether or not we had a flying saucer looking object in the bush, I don't know, but I believe some type of UFO carried the same being that we saw meeting with Abraham to the burning bush sequence. And then this being called out to Moses, whether with his real voice or whether with a voice that Moses only heard in his head, I do not know. And the voice said, "Moses, Moses, take off your shoes. You're on holy ground. I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." Now, what this is interesting because in modern UFO abduction stories, abduction researchers have found that very often abductions happen in families. If a young girl is abducted, they do an investigation and find that the girl's mother was abducted years ago, and the girl's grandmother was abducted years ago. What this means is that both our modern UFOs and the God of the Bible would probably all be on Ancestry.com if they were on Earth now, okay? They're interested in the lineage of the people involved, and they're following this family track all the way through. That's the Jewish story. And the Jewish story leads right up to Jesus eventually. But in any case, I believe that some type of UFO landed in the bush or in a thicket and caused the burning bush experience. And we have not only, of course, a burning bush, we have a talking bush, which is a little shocking. But if we're dealing with the God of Abraham, he's a talking God. And I think the talking God is right here in the bush talking to Moses. Okay, we can move on now to the next slide. Okay, number 4, Downing. That's good. Now, these are a series of quotes. At the top, the God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction, jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, forgiving control freak. That's Richard Dawkins, a scientist who works at Oxford University in England. He wrote a book called The God Delusion. He's an atheist. And this is on page 31 in his book, which was published in 2006. There have been a lot of atheist books written in the last, we'll say 15 years, 20 years, and this is one of them. Not only does he say, you see, that God is fiction, in other words, it never existed, but he's a jealous God, proud of it, petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak. He's not a nice guy. He doesn't like the God of the Bible, not only, but except for the fact that he's fiction, he doesn't exist. It's a common view now, I think, that the biblical story is generally made up by the biblical people. If you look up the Wikipedia listing for Moses, you will find that it says the vast majority of scholars now believe that Moses was simply a character in a story, like Hamlet in one of Shakespeare's plays. In other words, Moses never existed. If Moses never existed, then the burning bush never happened, the parting of the Red Sea never happened, the 10 Commandments never happened. It's all made up. And a lot of people are fine with the biblical religion being made up, okay? But I don't think that's how it happened. I think the biblical people were encountering some type of power that was extraterrestrial and that it brought about the biblical religion on purpose. We now actually find a good description of a UFO in the book of Exodus, chapter 13, verses 21 and 22. And the Lord went before them, they being Israel, by day in a pillar cloud to lead them along the way. And by night, they might travel by day and by night. The pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night did not depart from before the people. Now, what is the pillar of cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night? The pillar of cloud and the pillar of fire set forth in mythical language the statement of verse 17 that God led Israel. That's the Interpreter's Bible, volume 1, page 931, 1952 edition. Now, there are more recent interpretations of Exodus available now, but that's a pretty standard view, I think, of what the pillar of cloud and fire is. Some people suggested it was a volcano, but a volcano isn't going to fly through the sky like the pillar of cloud does. And furthermore, Moses isn't going to talk to a volcano, and Moses is talking to somebody in the pillar of cloud for 40 years. Another guy suggested that it might be the planet Venus making a near pass at planet Earth. This is Emmanuel Velikovsky in his book, Worlds in Collision. In any case, I think what this is a UFO similar to modern UFOs. If you go to the Wikipedia listing for unidentified flying objects, you will see that one of the main types seen are cigar-shaped or cylinders. And I think that's what we've got here. Okay, so now we move on to the issue of what happens after the pillar of cloud starts leading. The pillar of cloud leads the Jewish people up to the Red Sea, which seems like a very unwise thing to do because Pharaoh is rounding up 600 chariots to chase after the Jews and bring them back to Egypt. He decided he made a mistake in letting the Jews go free. Okay, so the pillar of cloud leads them up to the Red Sea, where obviously they're going to be trapped unless what? Unless a lucky wind comes along at just the right time. Let's suppose instead the pillar of cloud and fire is being flown by intelligent beings who have advanced technology to, in fact, cause the parting of the Red Sea, not just to wait for something lucky to happen, okay? That would mean that they led the Jews up to the Red Sea on purpose, because then when the Jews escape through the Red Sea and the Egyptians try to follow, they end up getting drowned, and that's the end of the Egyptian army. So I see the pillar of cloud carrying out a planned event at the parting of the Red Sea. And if you would go to the next slide, we can talk about the parting and what it might mean.
Before
I
we do
believe
that, I just
it says Red Sea should be number 5 after Downing.
sure. Before we do that, I just wanted to reintroduce. If you're just joining us on the Encounter program, I'm Reverend Rachel Helgeson, and I am speaking with Reverend Dr. Barry Downing. His background is both in religion, faith, and science, and has become an expert in talking about UFOs and faith and religion through the expert journals that cover that, and also through his own research that has been published internationally. So, and right now we're at the point of talking about the parting of the Red Sea. Before that, we talked a bit about Sarah and Abraham and the 3 messengers that came to speak with them, and also what the conversation of who God is and what God is about. So I'm going to pull up the next slide. For those of you that are watching and for those of you that are listening in, we have had different depictions of pictures of what Barry's been speaking about to depict where they might be and what the possibility of that looks like. So let me pull up our next slide now.
How far have we got to go still?
We still have a bit of time. So.
Yep, good. All right, the next picture is going to be having done another one done for me by Lynn Merrifield. And this is her version of the parting of the Red Sea. And I asked her to paint it more or less like this. I didn't have the skills to do the painting. Notice we have the walls of water on the left hand and on the right. And we have the pillar of cloud. Her version of it, it looks very much like some type of spaceship, but a pillar, a cylindrical column that would look cloud-like during the day and would glow in the dark. This picture depicts Exodus 14, verses 24 and 25. And I would say that these are 2 of the more neglected verses in the book of Exodus. Anybody who has heard about the parting of the Red Sea remembers 2 things. The Jews went through the Red Sea without getting drowned or anything. And then the Egyptians tried to follow them. And then the walls of water collapsed and drowned the Egyptians and their horses and so on. Verses 24 and 25 don't need to be in the story. The story makes sense without them. And the fact that verses 24 and 25 are in the story say to me, this was an observed event. Because what's happening? The Jews have crossed to the other side safely. You can see them going out the far end of the channel. And the Egyptians have been after them. And the Jews, first of all, said, wow, what a miracle. Whoever believed that we could walk through walls of water like that? And they turn around and look back and see the Egyptians coming, and they're saying, hey, God, are you paying attention? You know, you just did this great miracle and we're going to be killed anyway. What's the point of the miracle? And then something happens. And this is beginning at verse 24. And in the morning watch, which means is just getting light. In the morning watch, the Lord in the pillar of fire of cloud looked down upon the host of the Egyptians and discomfited the host of the Egyptians, blocking or tying up or locking their chariot wheels. The Hebrew here is very difficult, but it looks like some kind of power came down. A look down from the pillar of cloud caused the chariot wheels to lock up and stop turning. And then they drove heavily. And the Egyptians said, let us flee from before Israel, for the Lord fights for them against the Egyptians. And then Moses raised his hands and the walls of water collapsed, drowning the Egyptians. Now, what's going on with the Lord's look down? Some kind of power came down, and it's not a power that the biblical people understood. I think it's some type of advanced technology. I suspect it was some type of heat beam that came down and cause the wheels to lock up. We don't really know for sure what type of chariot technology was involved at this point. They started using chariots about 1600 BC. This is probably around 1200 BC when we're talking about the parting of the Red Sea. And so at the beginning, chariots were made all of wood, including the axle and the wheels. But eventually, metal technology would be working its way into the system. We're toward the end of the Bronze Age here. So in any case, I don't know exactly how the wheels were made, but I suspect, given what I know about modern UFOs, they often will dry out the ground they land on, turn it to basically sand. All the water is driven out of it. So modern UFOs can give off tremendous amounts of heat. And furthermore, the Bible makes the point that not only did the Jews cross between two walls of water, they crossed on dry ground. Anybody paying attention would have said, oh, there's got to be a muck out there. We're going to be up to our ankles in mud. But it was dry ground. How could that be? I think the answer is...
So Barry, I hate to interrupt you. This went so much faster than I expected it to, and it seems like we're going to have to do a second conversation, you and I. If you got to hear us today, we only got through half of what we were going to talk about because there's just so much that Barry's talked about. And
That's me. That's me. It's okay.
And so there you go. So I just wanted to say that we are grateful that you've been able to join us. And Barry and I are going to do another conversation. I am now 100% sure of that. And so if this has whetted your palate to be able to think about how God and faith are connected in ways that we never really thought about, or how science connects into that and what that looks like beyond our own understanding, I encourage you to read some of what Barry's written, but also to know that he is right here in the Endwell Southern Tier area. And so you can reach out to Northminster and we can make sure that that he could have a conversation with you, or more importantly, if you'd like to read one of his books, they've been published and you have access to that as well. So thank you so much, Barry. And thank you to our Encounter listeners and readers. We are glad that you've been able to be present with us today.
The Encounter program is just one ministry of the Broome County Council of Churches. You may know the council through its child program, the Community Hunger Outreach Warehouse. But the council also supports chaplaincies, the jail ministry providing an effective witness pointing to God's unconditional love as a source of emotional and spiritual renewal for those who are affected by the criminal justice system. At Wilson and Binghamton General Hospitals, on-call chaplains provide confidential visits, support for family members, and advocacy with support personnel. In addition, the Council's Faith and Action Ministry empowers people ages 60 and up to be involved in their community. This ministry mobilizes a network of volunteers to provide free social programs and care partnerships, and also supports the Ramp It Up program. You'll find much more at broomecouncil.net. That's broomecouncil.net.